Okay, the Dog Post pregame show. Dean Legge here, getting you ready for Georgia and South Carolina, a game that we've all grown accustomed to sweating like crazy. But now it's October, and we still very well may be sweating during this game. It's seemingly always hot for this game, one way or the other. Georgia's a 24 point favorite in this game, so South Carolina has got their work cut out for them. That is the largest line that South Carolina has ever had to Georgia. Even some of those really good Georgia teams, 2002, 2012, 2017, they've had to either survive South Carolina or have lost. The 2012 team lost and nearly won the national championship that year. So this has been a game that has been hard to understand. The 2007 season, South Carolina with an upset win in Athens. 2002, Georgia blowing everyone away at the end of the season, but barely surviving a mediocre South Carolina, mediocre Clemson teams to start the season, and really a mediocre Tennessee team, as it turns out, in October. But handling Alabama on the road, and then beating Auburn on the road, and then just catching fire after that game, destroying Georgia Tech, Arkansas, and Florida State on the way to a number 2 ranking to finish that season. But South Carolina has often given Georgia trouble. Many people think that's because this game has traditionally been at the beginning of the season where there's been a bunch of hope. This is, as I said yesterday in the Thursday show, this is only the third time since 1987 that South Carolina's come to this game with a losing record. So an upset in this game would be beyond shocking. I mean, this is a team that lost to North Carolina. Let's not forget that. And they're not on their starting quarterback. For all that's said about Ryan Hilinski, I mean, he didn't win the starting job coming out of the season. So he is there. The backup has taken over. This game, the over-under is 52.5. So that means they think Georgia's going to score and Carolina will not. The predictive score from Las Vegas is that Georgia should win 38-14. That would be a very, very lopsided Georgia win. I mean, we haven't seen something like that since 2015 and the mirage that was Grayson Lambert's performance in that game. Dog Walk will start at 9:45 on Saturday in Athens. It's an early kickoff, 12 o'clock on ESPN. Be curious what the rating will be for this game. I mean, you almost pulled $4 million in a game against a garbage Tennessee team. Can you do something similar to that? That was a night game. Can you do something? Can you do $3 million, $3.2 million with Carolina during a noon game that has decent competition always with Fox and ABC going at the same time? It's a good question. I mean, Georgia-Carolina is actually the 2013 Georgia-South Carolina game is one of the most viewed games in this past decade for the Dogs. And generally speaking for ESPN, I bet you it's a top 50 game for sure of the last decade since 2012. For ESPN. I'm going to actually try to look that up and see if that's actually true. But one thing that makes this game so interesting is that a former Georgia captain is the head coach at South Carolina. I mean, Georgia, that the middle 90s has produced some coaches from Georgia. I mean, you're starting to see the group that play with Mark Richt get out there and coach some too. But Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo, and Will Muschamp have all gone on to be head coaches at institutions. Obviously, Will at Florida and South Carolina, where he has been trying to escape the shadow that is Steve Spurrier. Let's listen to what Kirby had to say about his relationship with Will Muschamp and what Will has done at Carolina.
Yeah, there was not like a close relationship when we were here because he was a fifth-year senior captain and I was a redshirt freshman. That we were really in two different places. So, I mean, he was good to me, but it wasn't like we had a friendship. We were in two different spots in our career. Where we became closer was the opportunity he gave me to come to Valdosta State, he and Chris Hatcher, and we worked together there, and then we worked together at LSU. And those 2 years we spent in the same staff, we probably bonded more than we did while we were here. But he's always been a very intense coach, good football coach. I think he does a good job running a program. And that has allowed us to share information when possible, when it's not about scheme and it's more about philosophy. But he has been a good friend. I got a lot of respect for him.
I want to talk just for a second about how tough the South Carolina job is. And it shows how good Steve Spurrier really was in his time there. I mean, when you look at the history of South Carolina athletics, it's not a good program. And when you look at football, it's really been rough there for a long time. And what Steve had the ability to do, you're talking about a program that I think only has one conference championship in school history in a sport. And he came in, dominated their in-state rival. He had a solid record against Georgia. I don't think it was a winning one. I'd have to go back and count in my head. But you're talking about a program that any win over Georgia is a big deal. Any win over Clemson is a big deal. And there were 3 years in a row that 2010, 11, and 12, where they won both those games. One of those years in 2010 where they won the Eastern Division, something that I didn't see coming ever at South Carolina. So Will has been much more a normal South Carolina head coach, maybe even slightly good South Carolina head coach, but he's replacing a legend, and that's not easy to do. I mean, Kirby Smart replaced a legend at Georgia, but Mark was getting run out of town. Steve Spurrier was not at all getting run out of town. In fact, he got very lazy on the recruiting trail. You could tell that the time was closing, but it was all on Steve Spurrier's time clock. And that's what you saw when he quit in the middle of the season after, getting blown out at Georgia and then I think eating a loss at LSU or whatever happened with that one. South Carolina lost a home game, which is amazing. But I think the Carolina job is a much more difficult job than people realize. It's a lot more like NC State than it is Georgia or Clemson. I mean, it's not an ideal situation. That being said, they have come a long way in 20 years. South Carolina has come a long way in 20 years from what it used to be, which is a really grimy area around the stadium. It's still grimy. But they've done a little bit like Augusta National has, which is they've cleaned up the area right around the stadium as much as they can, and they've made it as nice as they can. Still a tough place to play for sure for Georgia, but this game's in Athens, where everything is pretty nice. The stadium is nice. Everything is nice. So this is going to be a tough game for South Carolina. And I was talking about recruiting earlier. I do want to rope in here Matt DeBary and have him talk a little bit about this weekend's recruiting fest and what to look for around the South. Every weekend in Athens is not always going to be the biggest game. Obviously, this weekend is LSU, Florida. So here's Matt DeBary. Matt, thanks for joining us today. And what you got for this weekend's recruiting report?
All right, thanks, Dean. On the recruiting side of things, it's not going to be a very big visitor list this weekend for the South Carolina game. Nothing like it was a couple weeks ago for Notre Dame. But there are going to be a few 2021 targets and commitments in town this weekend. The first is obviously 2021 safety commitment David Daniel out of Woodstock, 6'1", 6'2", about 190 pounds, one of the top defensive back prospects in the state of Georgia for that 2021 class. They've also got a couple running backs in town, one of them being Lavasi Carroll, Georgia native from Warrenton, Georgia, now plays at IMG Academy in Florida. He's a former South Carolina commitment, so one of the top running backs in the country. Hasn't visited Georgia since earlier this summer, so a big deal to get him on campus. He's one of the best in 2021, as is Cody Brown, high four-star running back out of Parkview High School here in Gwinnett County, one of the top running backs not only in Georgia but the South as well. So two highly ranked four-star running backs will be in town this weekend for the big game against South Carolina, along with defensive back commitment David Daniel. As it relates to 2020, guys, sources are saying that Zach Evans, five-star running back, will be at LSU this weekend when they host Florida. We'll see if he ends up making it, but right now the plans for him to be at LSU. Also, five-star cornerback Keely Ringo will be visiting Oregon for his official visit. He has not set a date for his University of Georgia official visit yet. We're expecting that to come later this fall. So again, this weekend, not a big visitor list. David Daniel, 2021 safety commitment, along with 2 4-star running backs, Lavasi Carroll out of IMG, Cody Brown out of Parkview. Those guys will be on campus.
Well, we appreciate that, Matt. Go to the website, dogpost.com right now. We've got a bunch of recruiting notes and news and notes. I'm having a hard time talking this morning. But this is a big game for Georgia. A few recruits in town, as Matt was saying, but they're gearing up for what is going to be a very critical October after this game. Georgia-Carolina kicks off at noon. We expect Georgia to win. Las Vegas expects them to win 38-14. I'm not sure. There's a few things that would be curious to see during this game. You know, is Georgia going to give up a rushing touchdown? Carolina has really solid running backs. What to expect from this team as they come home after a thorough beating of Tennessee, where it took them a little bit of time to get started. You know, it's always hard to know when a team is going to be jumping out ready to roll. Is Georgia going to do that today? I mean, are they going to have a meaningful start to the game where they jump on Carolina and coast? That's what they did to Vanderbilt. That's not really what they've done with anyone else since, maybe with the directional schools. So Notre Dame and Tennessee, certainly that was not the case. So Georgia, Carolina, a big game. A lot of us know a lot of people in South Carolina, and so it's a game we always watch very closely. We expect Georgia to win. Let's see if Carolina can shock the world. I kind of doubt it, but this is sports. Dean Legge, Dog Post, DAWGPOST.com. We'll see you over on the website.